So before today, the prophet Elijah had been hugely successful. I mean, he was the best of the best. He was the big man on campus. He had confronted kings, performed miracles, he raised the dead, and he even called lightning down from the sky. At least he was successful until just before today's reading. Today, instead of being the picture of a successful prophet, we hear of a man whose life and career are spinning out of control. You see, just prior to him being on the run, he won, or I should say God won, the ultimate in my dad is stronger than your dad contest, right? Or in this case, my God is stronger than your God showcase. Elijah bet the prophets of the god Baal that the God of Israel was more powerful. And it was in that bet that things started to go horribly wrong for Elijah. When indeed God did outperform the prophets, or outperformed Baal, when the lightning came down from the sky and it lit the offering on the altar, something that the prophets of Baal had been trying to get happen on their own altar all day long. So when that happened, Elijah celebrated his tremendous victory by personally executing all 400 of them. Gotta love the Hebrew Scriptures, right? Which was, after all, a part of the bet. Theirs had been a contest to the death, so it was no surprise. The only problem, as we heard being read, is that Queen Jezebel, the wife of the Jewish king Ahab, was a follower of Baal, and it was her prophets that he killed. And she was enraged. Elijah had killed her priests, humiliated her religion, and shamed her God. That was a bad day for Jezebel and for Elijah. She vowed that she would kill Elijah. So Elijah did what anyone would do. He ran. He ran, and he ran, and he ran. And he ran to Beersheba, which is in the southern kingdom of Judah, and so was outside of Jezebel's legal reach. But he didn't stop there. He continued another whole day into the wilderness, running by himself until he felt that he was somewhat safe, at least for a while. So there in the middle of nowhere, he collapses and he wants to die. He just wants it all to be over. And so he calls upon God to make it so. Take me now, God. And when that seems to be taking too long, he did what every other tired human does. He fell asleep. Many of us come to this point in our lives, sometimes over and over and over. Everything in our lives can be going so well. We meet success after success, and everything is falling into place. And then, boom, without a word of warning, our life is in chaos, and we feel like we're spinning out of control. And no matter how hard we work or how fast we run, we find ourselves exhausted and despairing, and we feel like just giving it all up. Yet in these horribly dark days that we sometimes have that descend upon us, in those nights that we have that are so filled with fear and fatigue, when we are at our lowest, feeling totally alone, that's when God draws even nearer. When Elijah was at his lowest, a messenger from God arrives and gives him food and tells him he's got to wake up and eat. You've got to take care of yourself, Elijah. Get up, eat. So Elijah gets up, he eats, and then he falls back asleep. And for a second time, an angel wakes him up to eat and says, Elijah, you've got to take care of yourself. Have this food. And after he doesn't go back to sleep this time, but he gets up and sets out on a 40-day journey and arriving at Mount Horeb. It's not just a mountain, it's the mountain of Moses' fame. And so finding a cave, Elijah crawls into it and waits. Or perhaps a better word for that is Elijah finds this cave and goes in and hides. And oh man, I have to say, I resonate with that, Elijah. There are days where hiding out in a cave seems like a really good thing to do. And if my iPhone would work, I would totally do it. And yet, there in that dark and lonely cave, Elijah hears God ask him a question. The question is, Elijah, what are you doing here? This is not a distant and unknowable and absent God. This is a God that is so near that we can feel God's breath. So in this intimate conversation, we hear Elijah pour his heart out to God. It goes something like this. I've worked so hard. I've been so faithful. While others didn't follow you, I have always followed you. I have done everything you've ever asked of me. And yet here I am, all alone. I'm the only one left of my kind. And now, because all I have done for you, there are people who want to kill me. So then the voice of God tells Elijah to go outside the cave, to leave his hiding spot behind, because God's going to come to where he is, and God's going to show up and make an appearance. And we know the signs, of course. There was a windstorm and an earthquake and a fire, but God was not in any of those. But then came the sound of sheer silence. And Elijah leaves the safety of his cave and goes to meet God in that stillness, where the conversation is played out all over again. God asks, "What are you doing here?" And once again, Elijah lays out all of his woes. In some respects, this is a rather sad story, actually. You see, Elijah has encountered the Word of God, and he hasn't been changed even a little bit. That's the sadness in the story. He's experienced all the signs of God's presence and how close God is to him at all times, including the one he's having in the moment. And still, Elijah hasn't changed one little bit. He remains in that very dark place. How many times have we been in a tough situation and longed to feel God's presence with us? How often, when we are despairing, have we longed to hear a word of life, just one little word of life, something I can hold on to, just a word of hope? We're sure that in the nighttime of our fears, if we could but hear that one little word of hope, we would be able to make it through the next number of days or weeks or months. How many times have we asked ourselves the very question that God asked Elijah? How many times have we asked, what am I doing here? There are lots of things that come along with living that we simply didn't put into our life plan. And when trouble hits, we do ask ourselves, how did this happen? This wasn't the plan. And when trouble hits, we ask ourselves, what do we do now? Where is my help? And it's in this dark place where God comes to us and asks us the question that we just asked of ourselves. What are you doing here? And because life has treated us unfairly and cruelly, we have a ready answer, just like Elijah did. Theologian Parker Palmer describes a thing he calls functional atheism, which is where we say we believe in God, but we often act like it's all up to us, right? So yes, we believe in God, but really, God, you better get out of the way because it's up to us now. And so we push our way forward, either in the world or in the cave of our fears, with the clear attitude of, well, if anything good is going to happen around here, then damn it, I'm going to have to do it myself. And we forget about God. Like Elijah, we can be blind to God's presence, which is always with us. It's always with us. We forget about God's capacity to tear the possible from the impossible. We forget about God's ability to breathe new life into dry bones and to stir up tired bodies, whether it's our own tired body or the tired body of the church. So what the writer of this story is trying to tell us is simple. God is here. no matter the life circumstance you're living through, God is with you. He's reminding us that we do not have control over the events of our lives or the world as much as we think we do. Life, all of life, is an unfolding. God is with us in the good, the bad, and the truly horrendous. It's not all up to us to fix it. Now, we must do our bit, but it's not all up to us. Because that's a burden far too heavy for any human to carry. We can't carry the weight of the world on our shoulders every day. Yet how often we hear the question of, what are you doing here? And answer, well, we're saving the world or our lives. Something you should be doing, God. Was exactly how Elijah answered. So God in our story gets even more direct in lifting the burdens that Elijah was carrying. And for Elijah, basically the burden he was carrying was, he felt it was his job to save the entire Jewish faith. And that's too much for any one person. And so God tells him to go to Damascus, to anoint a new king, find his successor Elisha, who would become the nation's prophet, and then Elijah is encouraged to retire. And God throws into the conversation that there will be thousands and thousands of people who will be faithful to God. They'll come along. That you're not alone in this work or this world. It's not all up to you. We have one another. So we may be in a discouraging time and may be very discouraged and depleted as individuals and as communities. And maybe we've even lost sight of the light of hope. We may very well be looking around and seeing only violence or endings. The end of a life, the end of our faith tradition, the destruction of the environment, the end of civility and peace and compassion in our daily living. And we feel that weight, that burden on our shoulders. Yet God's word to Elijah are the same to us. In God, there is always a future. There are others who can and will join you. So you can lay your burdens down, and God's kingdom will still arrive. God's kingdom, where all is right and reconciled, will still come. It's not all up to just me or just you. Life is an unfolding, and no matter if we are in the cave of despair, or living in confusion and hurt out in the world, or having the time of our lives, God is there, God is here. And we are a part of that great unfolding, but we're only a part of that unfolding. And when we remember this, that's how we know that we are in that still, quiet place where we can feel the divine presence. And when we feel that, we are indeed standing in the light. May it be